Arraign the defendant.
In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, the grand jurors do present in and to the Criminal District Court of Dallas County that one Lee Harvey Oswald, on the 22nd day of November, in the year of our Lord 1963, in the state aforesaid, did then and there with malice aforethought kill John Fitzgerald Kennedy by shooting him with a gun.
Lee Harvey Oswald, how do you plead?
Your Honor, the defendant stands mute.
Standing mute under the law is equivalent to pleading not guilty.
Your Honor, as counsel for the defense, I would like to add to that plea an additional plea of not guilty by reason of existing insanity.
Directing your attention to the 22nd day of November of the year 1963 at approximately 12:30 p.m. Would you please tell the court and the jury where you were?
Well, my girlfriend and I had decided to spend our lunch hour by going down to watch the president go by, to watch the motorcade.
Now, would you tell us specifically where you were and how you got there?
We were afraid there would be too many people on Main Street, so we walked on down and stood in the grassy slope just this side of the triple underpass. That's near the corner of Elm and Houston Streets.
Would you describe what happened?
The president's car turned the corner and started toward us on Elm Street. There were a lot of motorcycle police in front of the president's car. My friend was afraid I didn't see the president, so she said, "Look, there's the president's car. Get a picture of him." He turned to us and waved. He faced forward again. I lifted my Polaroid. Just as I snapped the picture, I heard a shot. My Polaroid showed the president slumped over in the car, and it shows his wife leaning toward him. I heard her say, "My God, he's been shot." Then I heard another shot or two ring out.
What else did you see?
Well, the motorcade kept going at the same speed for a moment. Then it sped up. Some of the policemen sped up and some stopped. Sirens were blowing and everywhere. People were falling on the ground. I saw this man standing next to me throw his little boy on the ground. So my friend and I fell on the ground too.
Thank you.
I was standing near the Texas School Book Depository building at Elm and Houston Streets.
Describe what you heard and saw.
After I heard the first shot, I looked up and saw this man pointing a rifle out of a window. I saw him fire a second shot. He didn't seem to be in a hurry.
How were you employed on November 22nd, 1963?
Resident Chief of Neurosurgery at Parkland Hospital.
That's in Dallas.
Yes.
Would you describe what happened on that day, shortly after noon?
The police department had called the hospital and said that the president had been shot and was being rushed to Parkland. I got to emergency operating room number 1 several minutes after the president had been taken there. About 10 or 12 doctors and members of the hospital staff were working, attempting to save the president's life.
Would you describe the president's condition?
I observed 2 wounds, one in the lower front portion of the neck and one in the right rear of the head. The eyes were fixed and the pupils dilated. I realized that there was very little hope for the patient.
What was revealed by the autopsy?
Our examination revealed that the president was struck by 2 bullets. The first bullet struck the president in the back, just below the collarbone, and lodged in his body. The second bullet struck the president in the back of the head and fragmented. A splintered piece of the second bullet went through the president's neck and exited in the lower part of the neck.
Point out the wounds on my neck and head, Doctor. So that your autopsy revealed that there were no entrance wounds in the front of the body. Is that correct, Doctor?
That's right. There were no entrance wounds in the front. The shots definitely came from the rear.
Objection, Your Honor. That is a conclusion on his part. He was not there. He may not position the parties.
Sustained.
I was the elevator operator at the school book depository.
Did you know the defendant at that time?
Yes, sir. I knew him.
Did you see Oswald on November 22nd?
Yes, sir. It was right before lunch. I took him up to the top floor, the 7th floor. And I said to him, let's go down and watch the president go by. But he declined.
Who was on your elevator for the first coffee break?
I don't know.
Yet you remember taking Oswald to the 7th floor. What time was it right before lunch?
Well, it was before 12 o'clock.
Who was the next person you hauled after Oswald?
I don't know.
Why is your memory so good about Oswald? Have the police been coaching you?
Objection! He's arguing with the witness.
Sustained. Don't do that again, Mr. Tyler. You know better.
I drive a bus for the city.
On November 22nd, did you encounter Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yes, I was driving down Elm Street near Griffin when this young man came up and knocked on the door of the bus, and I let him in.
No, I didn't know it was Oswald until the FBI traced the transfer slip I gave him.
How did they do that?
Well, the transfer slip had my punch on it. Each driver has his own punch.
In other words, had it not been for the transfer being traced, you'd never have remembered Oswald.
No, he was just another passenger.
Pass the witness.
What is your occupation?
I drive a cab. Taxi cab driver.
Have you ever seen the defendant in this case prior to today?
Yes. The day the president was shot.
That would be November the 22nd?
Yes. I had just had lunch and was parked near the Greyhound bus station on the corner of Commerce and Lamar Streets. This fellow came up and said, "Can I take this cab?" He got in and said, "Drive me to the 500 block of North Beckley."
I'm the housekeeper at a rooming house at 1026 North Beckley.
Did you ever rent a room to a man named O.H. Lee?
Yes, sir. I rented him a small room for $8 a week on October the 14th.
And is this man who called himself O.H. Lee present in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir. That's him, Lee Oswald.
I saw this police car pull up down the street from me, and then I saw this man walk over to the police car, and he leaned into the window to say something to the officer, and then the officer, well, he got out of the car and walked around the back to say something to him. And then all of a sudden they just stopped and looked at each other, and then this man, he pulled out a gun.
Objection!
And he shot the officer 3 times.
Objection! Objection, Your Honor. We object on the grounds that this evidence tends to prove a crime other than that for which the accused is on trial.
Your Honor, we contend that the shooting of the police officer was committed as part of the same transaction, and that specifically it shows the defendant's flight from the scene of the crime for which he is on trial here today, and his intention to use all possible means to prevent arrest.
I'm a patrolman for the Dallas Police Department. I had just checked out a false tip at the branch library. A call came in on the radio saying a man acting funny was holed up in the Texas Theater. The call came from the cashier at the picture show. I slipped out from behind the screen and headed up the aisle. Some fella down near the front told me that the man I wanted was seated about 3 rows from the rear. I was crouching low with my gun ready for trouble.
Did the defendant resist arrest?
I headed up the aisle and turned into Oswald's row, and when we were no more than a foot apart, he stood up and put up both hands. "It's all over now," he said. Then he hit me a good one in the face with his fist and went for his gun. He kept saying, "I protest this police brutality."
Did that sound a little strange to you?
It sounded kind of crazy considering the fact he had just tried to shoot my head off.
Crazy. Thank you, officer. No more questions.
Did you see the defendant on November 22nd?
Yes, I work at the school book depository, too. That Friday, he was staying at the neighbor's, and he called and asked if he could ride into work with me. I picked him up and we drove into town.
Did you notice anything unusual about him?
Well, he was carrying a long package, if that's what you mean.
That's exactly what I mean. Is this the rifle you found on the 6th floor of the school book depository building?
Yes, sir, that is the rifle I found. I found it in a stack of books at a stairwell on the 6th floor. Yes, sir, those are the 3 expended shells that I found in the sniper's nest that day.
We submit them. State's Exhibit number 3.
No objection.
Admitted.
I'm a supervisor at the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. That's the rifle and shells sent to us at the laboratory in connection with the death of the president. These are the 3 bullets recovered by our agents and sent to me for ballistics tests. One of the bullets was recovered from the stretcher on which the president was carried into the hospital. The second one came from the floor of the car in which the president rode. And the 3rd bullet was taken from the president's body in the autopsy. We found that the bullets that killed the president were fired in that rifle.
I am a handwriting analyst for the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C.
Would you identify this, sir?
Yes. That is a letter ordering a rifle and a 4-power telescope for $19.95.
And where did you obtain this?
It was furnished to us by a mail-order house in Chicago. FBI agents used the serial number on the rifle to determine that the rifle was sold by the firm.
Did you determine who wrote those documents?
Yes, I did. They were both written by the same man, Lee Oswald.
I am an announcer for a radio station in New Orleans.
Have you ever met the defendant, Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yes, he appeared on my radio panel show August 21st, 1963.
You were asked to bring the tape recording of that show on which the defendant appeared?
Yes, I have it right here.
Thank you.
Are you or have you been a communist?
Well, I had answered that prior to this program on another radio program.
Are you a Marxist?
Yes, I am a Marxist.
To the layman, Doctor, does this mean he is insane?
Objection! It is up to the jury to decide if this man is insane. At this time, the state closes, Your Honor.
The defense closes, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Close the testimony. Excuse all the witnesses.
But remember, it is all circumstantial evidence. No one actually saw who committed this infamous crime. The state had even more evidence, but they knew I could strike it down and they didn't even offer it. Wherever I could, I have challenged the evidence as it was introduced. I shall not do so again. Rather, I will leave it to you to determine the conclusiveness of this circumstantial evidence. But should you believe from that evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald actually committed murder, I want you to remember what the judge has told you. If the accused was insane at the time the act was committed, you cannot find him guilty. You must acquit him because he was unaccountable for his act.
And Lee Harvey Oswald is the man who killed our president. He and he alone pulled the trigger that let loose those devastating bullets to strike down our beloved leader. The evidence points conclusively and overwhelmingly to him. Never in all my life before have I seen evidence more conclusive. Do your duty under the law and the evidence, and there can be only one possible verdict. When you retire to deliberate, you will vote the defendant guilty. And I say to you, Lee Harvey Oswald, you are guilty as the evidence shows. You have turned your back on the human race.